The Cedar Grove Community Center's lights went out at exactly 10:30 p.m., just like they did every Tuesday night. Mike Thompson gathered the basketballs, his keys jingling in his pocket as he moved across the polished wooden floor. The other four men were still changing in the locker room, their voices echoing through the empty building. "Great game tonight, guys," Mike called out as he pushed open the locker room door. The smell of sweat and old sneakers filled the air. Buddy Davis was pulling his red mechanic's shirt over his head, the name Bob's Auto still visible despite countless washes. James Wilson sat on the bench, tying his shoes with careful precision, the same way he did everything as a high school teacher. Daniel Morris was already dressed, his construction worker's build making him look too big for the small wooden bench. Bill Parker, still in his basketball shorts, was talking about the grocery store's latest delivery problems. "Hey Mike, you sure you don't want to grab a beer?" Bill asked, running a towel through his damp hair. "Mary won't mind if I'm a little late tonight." Mike checked his watch, a habit from 15 years of coaching. "You know what? Why not? It's not every night we beat the younger guys." They all laughed. At their ages, early 30s mostly, they weren't old, but playing against the college kids made them feel ancient some nights. The five men piled into Mike's blue Ford station wagon, the same car he used to haul sports equipment for the high school teams. The night was unusually cold for September, and a strange fog had settled over Cedar Grove streets. Buddy suggested they drive up to Morgan's Point, a local lookout spot where they could see the whole valley. "I heard they're putting up one of those new radio towers up there," Daniel said as they drove. "My crew's supposed to start the foundation work next week." The road up to Morgan's Point twisted through dark pine trees. Mike's headlights caught glimpses of deer eyes in the forest. The radio started crackling with static. "Piece of junk," Buddy muttered, trying to tune it. "Want me to take a look at it this weekend, Mike?" But Mike wasn't listening. He was staring at the dashboard, where all the gauges had suddenly gone wild. The speedometer jumped from 30 to 90 and back. The gas gauge swung from full to empty. "What the hell?" he muttered, slowing down. James leaned forward from the back seat. "Look at that." Above the trees ahead, three bright lights formed a perfect triangle in the sky. They weren't airplane lights. They were too steady, too close together. "Pull over," Bill said quietly. "Pull over right now." Mike guided the car into the lookout point's gravel parking area. The lights seemed to hover directly above them now. The car's engine died without warning. "Buddy," Mike tried the key. Nothing. Not even a click. Then they saw it. Geometric patterns appearing on the hood of the car, like frost forming on a window, but in perfect squares and triangles. The patterns glowed with a faint blue light. "We should get out," Daniel said, reaching for his door handle. "Something's not right." The air outside was eerily still. No cricket sounds, no rustle of leaves. The fog had become thicker, swirling around their feet in unnatural patterns. James pulled out his wallet and handed it to Mike. "Hold this. I want to get a closer look at those patterns." Before Mike could stop him, James walked to the front of the car. The glowing patterns seemed to pulse brighter. Then James disappeared. Not like in the movies with a flash or a sound. 1 second he was there. The next, nothing. "James," Bill shouted, running forward. He vanished too. In the next 30 seconds, as Mike stood frozen with James's wallet in his hand, he watched Buddy and Daniel disappear into thin air as they tried to help their friends. The lights above grew brighter. Mike felt a strange pulling sensation, like his whole body was falling asleep. The last thing he saw was James's driver's license photo smiling up at him from the wallet. And then, nothing. The blue Ford station wagon sat empty in the Morgan's Point parking lot, its hood covered in impossible geometric patterns that slowly faded like melting frost, while 5 sets of footprints in the gravel led nowhere at all. Sheriff Catherine Anderson's coffee was still hot when the call came in. Mary Parker hadn't heard from her husband Bill all night, and neither had the wives and girlfriends of the other 4 men. It wasn't like them, especially Mike Thompson, who never missed morning practice with his high school basketball team. "Get Deputy Martinez," Catherine told the dispatcher, "and call search and rescue. Something's not right about this." By sunrise, Catherine stood in the gravel parking lot of Morgan's Point, staring at Mike Thompson's blue Ford station wagon. The morning fog wrapped around her boots as she walked around the vehicle. Everything looked normal, except it didn't. The car was too clean, like it had been washed in the middle of the night. And it was cold, colder than it should have been. Deputy Frank Martinez arrived with the search dogs. He was a big man who moved carefully, like he was always afraid of breaking something. "Sheriff, you need to see this," he called from the front of the car. Catherine walked over. In the early morning light, she could see faint patterns on the hood, geometric shapes that looked almost burned into the paint. "What do you make of that?" Frank asked, pulling out his notebook. Before she could answer, the search dogs started whining. These were trained German shepherds that had found lost hikers in blizzards, but now they were backing away from the car, tails between their legs. "Try again," Frank told the handlers, but the dogs wouldn't go near it. Catherine pulled out her radio to call it in, but only static came through. Her phone showed no signal, even though Morgan's Point usually had perfect reception. Even her watch had stopped at 10:47 p.m., the exact time Mary Parker said Bill had promised to be home. "Frank, get the forensics team up here, and bring a Geiger counter." While they waited, Catherine interviewed the first witness, a teenager named Tommy who'd been stargazing last night. "There were these lights," Tommy said, hugging himself against the unusual cold. "Like a triangle in the sky. I thought it was a plane at first, but planes don't just sit still like that." The forensics team arrived, led by Alice Weber, who'd been measuring radiation levels in Cedar Grove for 20 years. Alice took one look at her Geiger counter and frowned. "This can't be right," she muttered, walking around the car. "Sheriff, these readings, they're not dangerous, but they're not normal. And look at this." She held up a compass. The needle spun in lazy circles, ignoring north completely. Catherine ordered everyone to step back from the car. That's when they found the first real clue. James Wilson's glasses, lying in the gravel about 20 feet from the car. They were perfectly clean, like they'd been placed there carefully. "Start expanding the search," Catherine ordered. "I want every inch of these woods checked." Search and rescue teams spread out through the forest. Catherine walked with them, noting how quiet it was. No birds, no squirrels, even the wind seemed muted. Then the radios started working again, all at once. Static burst from every handset, making everyone jump. Through the noise, Catherine could have sworn she heard voices. Not English, not any language she knew. "Did anyone else hear that?" she asked. Before anyone could answer, a low humming filled the air. The temperature dropped so fast Catherine could see her breath. The compass in Alice's hand started spinning wildly. "Everyone back to base," Catherine ordered, but her voice sounded wrong, like she was talking underwater. The humming grew louder. Through the trees, Catherine saw 3 points of light forming a triangle, just like Tommy had described. Her radio crackled again, and this time she definitely heard voices through the static. Human subjects responding as expected. Proceed with phase 2. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The woods were normal again. Birds resumed their morning songs. Catherine's watch started ticking. Her phone found its signal, and the compass pointed north. But now she knew. This wasn't just a missing persons case. Something had taken those 5 men, something that left behind impossible radiation readings and geometric patterns, something that wasn't from Cedar Grove or anywhere else on Earth. And somehow, she had to find them before it happened again. The black military helicopters arrived 3 days after the men disappeared. They landed in the high school parking lot, kicking up dust and old newspapers. Colonel Laura Bennett stepped out first, her boots hitting the ground with purpose. She walked straight to Sheriff Catherine Anderson, who was waiting by her patrol car. "This area is now under military control," Colonel Bennett said, holding up official-looking papers. "We'll take it from here, Sheriff." Catherine crossed her arms. "With all due respect, Colonel, these are my people who are missing. I'm not going anywhere." The colonel's face softened slightly. "Walk with me, Sheriff. There's something you need to see." They walked to a quiet corner of the parking lot. The colonel pulled out a thick folder from her briefcase. Inside were photos, dozens of them, showing the same triangle of lights that Tommy had described. They dated back to the 1950s. "Cedar Grove isn't just some random town," Colonel Bennett explained. "Something about this valley attracts them." "Them?" Catherine asked, though she already knew the answer. "We call them the observers. They'd been studying us for decades, usually from a distance, but sometimes—" The colonel paused, looking at the mountains. "Sometimes they take a closer look." Catherine thought about the strange patterns on Mike's car, the compass going crazy, the weird voices on the radio. "Why didn't you warn us?" "Would you have believed us?" Colonel Bennett asked. "Besides, they'd never taken this many people at once. Something's different this time." Just then, Deputy Martinez ran up to them, out of breath. "Sheriff, Colonel, you need to see this. We found something at Morgan's Point." They drove up to the lookout in Catherine's patrol car. A group of soldiers had roped off an area where the ground seemed to be glowing. Soft blue light pulsed in geometric patterns, just like the ones on Mike's car. Colonel Bennett knelt down and pressed her hand against the dirt. "It's warm," she said. Then she pulled out what looked like a phone but wasn't. "These readings are off the charts. They're still here, watching us." "How do you know?" Catherine asked. The colonel pointed to her strange device. "These energy signatures, they're like footprints, but in space-time. The observers leave them behind when they—" She stopped talking suddenly, staring at the screen. "What is it?" "This is impossible," Colonel Bennett whispered. "These readings, they're not just residual. They're active. Right now." The air around them grew thick, like swimming through invisible syrup. Catherine's ears popped. Above them, the clouds started swirling in a perfect circle. "Everyone down," the colonel shouted, but her voice seemed far away. A beam of blue light shot from the sky, hitting the glowing ground. In that light, Catherine saw something that changed everything she thought she knew about the world. Figures appeared in the beam, tall, slender shapes that moved like liquid silver. They weren't solid, more like reflections in moving water, and they were looking right at them. One of the figures raised what might have been an arm. Symbols appeared in the air, geometric patterns that spun and changed. "They're trying to communicate," Colonel Bennett said, her voice filled with wonder. "After all these years, the symbols rearranged themselves, forming English letters. We have QUESTIONs. Your FIV WLL HELPUS UNDERS TAND do note NTURVR." Then everything vanished. The beam, the figures, the symbols. But the ground was still warm, and Catherine's watch had stopped again. Colonel Bennett stood up slowly. "Well, Sheriff Anderson, now you know. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Catherine thought about the 5 missing men, about their families waiting for answers. She thought about the strange voices on her radio, and the impossible things she'd just seen. "We're going to find them," she said firmly. "But first, Colonel, you're going to tell me everything you know about these observers. No more secrets." The colonel nodded, looking relieved. "There's an old facility nearby. Underground. That's where it all started, back in '52. I think it's time you saw it." Above them, the clouds returned to normal, but Catherine knew nothing would ever be normal again. Somewhere out there, 5 men from her town were helping aliens understand something about humanity, and she was starting to think that might not be such a bad thing. She just hoped they were ready for the answers they might find. The old mining road looked like any other dirt path in the woods, but Colonel Bennett's map showed otherwise. She stopped her jeep in front of what seemed to be a normal rocky hillside. Catherine watched as the colonel pulled out a key card that looked too modern for this forgotten place. In 1952, Colonel Bennett explained, a mining crew disappeared here for 3 days. When they came back, they had stories about lights in the sky and strange voices. Nobody believed them, of course, but the government listened. She waved the card at a hidden sensor. With a quiet hiss, a door appeared in the rock face. "Welcome to Project Starwatch," the colonel said. Catherine and Deputy Martinez followed her inside. The tunnel was surprisingly clean, with metal walls and bright lights. Their footsteps echoed as they walked deeper underground. "This facility has been monitoring Cedar Grove for over 70 years, Colonel Bennett continued. "The observers chose this valley for a reason. Something about the mountain's mineral content creates a natural gateway." "A gateway to what?" Martins asked. "To them." They reached a large room filled with old computers and newer equipment. Maps covered the walls, showing Cedar Grove and the surrounding mountains. Red dots marked spots where the observers had been seen. "Look at this," Catherine said, pointing to the maps. "The dots make a pattern, like the ones we saw on Mike's car." Colonel Bennett nodded. "We think they're trying to tell us something through these patterns, but we've never been able to crack their code." In the center of the room stood a strange machine. It looked like a metal arch covered in the same geometric symbols they'd seen before. Dust covered most of it, but one panel was clean and glowing softly. "Someone's been here recently," Martins said, running his finger through the dust beside the clean spot. The colonel rushed to the machine. "This is impossible. This device hasn't worked since 1963. We've tried everything to." She stopped talking as the symbols on the arch began to glow blue. "What is it?" Catherine asked, moving closer. "We call it the mirror. The observers left it behind after the mining incident. We think it's some kind of communication device, but we could never make it work." The glowing symbols started moving, flowing like water across the metal surface. A humming filled the room, the same sound Catherine had heard in the woods. "They're not just taking people randomly," Colonel Bennett said suddenly, her eyes wide with understanding. "They're looking for something specific. The 5 men. Think about who they are." Catherine thought about it. Mike the coach, Buddy the mechanic, James the teacher, Daniel the builder, and Bill the store owner. "They're all normal people," she said. "Exactly." The colonel pointed to an old photo on the wall. The mining crew from 52. They were just normal people too. The observers don't want scientists or soldiers. They want to understand ordinary humans. The humming grew louder. The clean spot on the machine was spreading like ice melting in reverse. "Someone activated this recently," Colonel Bennett said. "The 5 men. They must have found this place before they disappeared. They didn't just get taken. They'd made contact." Suddenly, all the lights in the facility flickered. The computer screens filled with moving symbols. "Look," Martins pointed at one of the screens. Words were forming. "They she shows to help. They understand now. The test is." "Test?" Catherine asked. "What test?" Before anyone could answer, the machine's arch filled with swirling blue light. Through it, like looking through a waterfall, they could see a room that wasn't there. And in that room, standing calmly, was Bill Parker. He smiled and waved at them. Behind him, strange silver figures moved in the background. Then he spoke, his voice coming through clearly. "Sheriff Anderson, we're okay. All of us. But you need to understand, we're not prisoners. We're teachers." The image started to fade. "Bill, wait," Catherine called out. "Teachers of what?" His last words barely made it through. "Of what makes us human." The light vanished. The machine went dark, but now they had hope. and a lot more questions. Mike Thompson woke up in a room that shouldn't exist. The walls looked like flowing silver, and the light came from everywhere and nowhere at once. He found the others nearby. Bobby, James, Daniel, and Bill, all sleeping peacefully on what felt like clouds but looked like glass. "Hey, wake up," Mike said, gently shaking each man. They opened their eyes slowly, like waking from a deep, peaceful sleep. "Where are we?" Bobby asked, sitting up and looking around. The room had no corners, just smooth curves that flowed into each other. Their basketball clothes were gone, replaced by simple white suits that seemed to glow slightly. "I think," James said carefully, "we're in their laboratory." As if responding to his words, a door appeared in the wall. It didn't open. It simply stopped being a wall and became an opening. Through it glided one of the observers. Up close, they were beautiful in a strange way. The observer looked like a living reflection, its silver form constantly moving like mercury. It had a head and body, but they flowed and changed shape as it moved. "Welcome," it said, but its voice was in their heads, not in their ears. "You have questions." "About 1,000,000, Daniel muttered. The observer's form rippled in what might have been amusement. "Follow." They walked through corridors that appeared as they needed them and disappeared behind them. Other observers moved past them, each one unique in its flowing patterns. "This is a research station," the first observer explained in their minds. "We study life. We study adaptation. We study humanity." They entered a vast room filled with what looked like windows into other places. Through one, they saw a rainforest. Through another, an ocean floor. Through a third, the surface of what had to be another planet. "For centuries, we watched," the observer continued. "Humans adapt faster than any species we have found. You change, grow, learn, survive. We need to understand how." Bill stepped closer to one of the windows. "Why us? Why Cedar Grove?" The observer's form shifted to face him. "Your town sits at a conjunction of natural gateways. And you five. You each represent an aspect of human adaptation we need to understand." It turned to Mike. "You teach young humans to work together, to become more than they are." To Bobby, "You understand machines by feel, not just logic." To James, "You share knowledge in ways that change with each student." To Daniel, "You build new things from imagination." To Bill, "You keep your community fed and connected." "But we're just normal guys," Daniel said. The observer's form brightened. "Exactly. Pure science minds cannot teach us what we need to learn. We need normal." It led them to another room, where more observers waited. Here, the walls showed scenes from human history. People overcoming disasters, building cities, creating art, helping strangers. "Our species is dying," the observer said simply. "We became too perfect, too unchanging. We forgot how to adapt. But humans thrive on change. You want us to teach you how to be more like us?" James asked, understanding dawning on his face. "Yes, not your technology or your science. We need to learn your humanity." Mike thought about his basketball team, how they grew stronger by facing challenges. "You need to learn how to fail," he said. "How to get back up and try again." The observer's form pulsed brightly. "Yes, this is why we chose you. Already you understand." Bobby laughed suddenly. "You know what's funny? On Earth, everyone's worried about aliens being way ahead of us. But you're actually here to learn from us." "We are ahead in many ways," the observer agreed. "But we are behind in the ways that matter most." The walls shifted, showing Cedar Grove. They could see the police cars, the search teams, their worried families. "We can send you back," the observer said, "or you can stay and help us learn. The choice is yours." The five men looked at each other. They were just normal guys from a small town. But maybe that's exactly what these advanced beings needed. Bill stepped forward. "We'll help you," he said. "But first, let us tell our families we're okay." The observer's form glowed with what felt like joy. This, it said, is exactly the kind of thinking we need to learn. After sending their message through the mirror, the 5 men began their strange new job, teaching aliens how to be more human. It wasn't easy. The observers had trouble understanding the simplest human concepts. No, Bobby said, watching an observer try to fix a broken machine. Don't just replace the parts. Feel the engine. Listen to it. Sometimes a machine tells you what's wrong if you pay attention. The observer's silver form rippled in confusion. But our scans show the exact problem. Why use uncertain methods? Because that's how you learn, Bobby explained. Every mistake teaches you something new. Every problem solved makes you better at solving the next one. In another room, James was having a similar challenge. He stood in front of a group of observers, trying to explain the concept of teaching itself. Look, he said, picking up what looked like a pen, but probably wasn't. If I just download information into your minds, you won't really understand it. You have to struggle with it, question it, make it your own. Mike worked with them on teamwork, using his coaching skills in ways he never expected. He had them play simple games, deliberately creating problems they had to solve together. But why not work alone? An observer asked after failing a task. Alone is more efficient. Mike smiled. Watch this. He set up the same task again, but this time had 3 observers work together. They solved it twice as fast. See, sometimes the mess of working together creates something better than perfect order. Daniel taught them about building things, but not the way they expected. Instead of precise plans, he showed them how to improvise and adapt. Sometimes you don't know if something will work until you try it, he said, helping them build a simple bridge. And when it falls down, you learn from it and build it better next time. Bill's lessons focused on community. He explained how his grocery store wasn't just about selling food. It was about creating connections between people. Every day, he told them, I make small choices that help people. Maybe I hold back some fresh bread for old Mrs. Wilson because I know she comes in late. Or I give the Johnson kids a free apple because their dad lost his job. It's not efficient, but it's human. The observers were starting to change. Their silver forms began showing traces of color when they felt strong emotions. They started making choices that weren't perfectly logical but felt right. One day, an observer rushed into their living quarters, its form flickering with excitement. Come quickly, something is wrong. They followed it to a room where a young observer was trying to learn how to manipulate energy fields. The field had collapsed, and now strange patterns were appearing in the air. Fix it, the first observer said. Our systems cannot solve this problem. The 5 men looked at each other and smiled. This was a test, not for the young observer, but for them. We won't fix it, Mike said gently, but we'll help you figure out how to fix it yourself. For the next hour, they guided the young observer through the problem. They let it make mistakes. They encouraged it to try new things. When it finally succeeded, its form burst into colors they'd never seen before. I understand now, it said. The uncertainty, it was necessary. The mistakes, they taught me. Later that night, the 5 men sat in their quarters, talking about the day. They're getting it, Daniel said. Slowly, but they're getting it. Yeah, Bobby agreed, but I can't help wondering. What happens when they finally learn what they need? What happens to us? Before anyone could answer, their main observer guide appeared in the doorway. Its form was shifting rapidly between colors. We need to talk, it said, about your future and ours. The men looked at each other. Whatever came next would change everything. For them, for Cedar Grove, and maybe for both species. The main observer led the 5 men to a new room they hadn't seen before. This one was different. It felt older, more important. The walls showed moving images of both human history and observer history side by side. Our council has been watching your lessons, the observer said. Its silver form now showed steady swirls of blue and green. Colors they had learned meant deep thought and hope. They have made a decision. More observers entered the room, their forms larger and more complex than any the men had seen before. These were the leaders, the ones who had first decided to study humanity. "We offer you a choice," one of the council members said. Its voice in their heads was stronger, older somehow. "You can return home now, your memories erased, your lives unchanged. Or what?" Mike asked, though he had a feeling he knew what was coming. "Or you can stay, become permanent teachers, help us save our species." The room fell silent. The men looked at each other, each thinking about what that would mean. "What about our families?" Bill asked. "Our lives back home." Another council member moved forward. "If you choose to stay, we will explain everything to your loved ones. They can know the truth. They can even visit, sometimes, through the gateway." Bobby stood up straighter. "And if we say no? If we want to go home?" "Then you go home. No harm, no memory of this place. Your lives continue as before." James, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Can we offer a third choice?" The council members' forms rippled with surprise, a reaction the men had never seen from them before. "What other choice could there be?" the first council member asked. James looked at his friends, who nodded for him to continue. "Instead of us staying here, why don't you come to us? Not all at once, not openly, but send your people to Earth, a few at a time. Let them live among us, learn from everyone, not just 5 guys from a small town." The council members' colors shifted rapidly as they communicated with each other in ways the men couldn't hear. Daniel jumped in. "Think about it. You're already learning that the best way to understand something is to experience it yourself. What better way to learn humanity than to live among humans?" "But the risk," one council member said. Mike laughed. "Risk is part of living. That's what we've been trying to teach you. You can't grow if you're always playing it safe." Bill added his thoughts. "My store works because it's part of the community. You need to be part of our community to really understand us." The council members' colors had never moved so fast. The main observer who had been teaching them stepped forward, its form now showing bright streaks of gold, the color of breakthrough moments. "They are right," it said to the council. "I have learned more watching them interact with each other than from all their direct lessons. We need to experience, not just observe." The council members gathered in a tight circle, their forms merging slightly as they communicated. When they separated, their decision was made. "We accept this third choice," the lead council member announced. "But we need your help to make it work. You will be our ambassadors, helping our people learn to blend in, to live among humans without causing fear." "And you'll let us go home?" Bobby asked. "Yes, but you will remember everything. You will be the bridge between our worlds." The 5 men huddled together, talking quietly. They each had lives waiting for them, families, jobs, responsibilities. But they also had a chance to be part of something bigger than themselves. One by one, they nodded. "We'll do it," Mike said for all of them. "But we have some conditions of our own." The council's colors shifted to show curiosity. "What conditions?" Mike smiled. "First, we need to call Sheriff Anderson. She's probably still worried sick about us." 6 months after the disappearance at Morgan's Point, Cedar Grove had changed in ways only a few people could see. To most folks, everything looked normal. Mike Thompson was still coaching basketball. Bobby Davis still fixed cars. James Wilson taught his classes. Daniel Morris worked construction, and Bill Parker ran his grocery store. But if you knew where to look, you might notice something different. Like how Mike's high school basketball team now included a tall, graceful student who moved like flowing silver when nobody was watching. Or how Bobby sometimes talked to his tools in a way that made them work better than they should. Or how James's new teaching assistant could change the color of her skin when she got excited about a lesson. Sheriff Catherine Anderson sat in her office, looking at a report that would never be filed. Colonel Bennett stood by the window, watching people walk down Main Street. "How many of them are here now?" Catherine asked. 20, the colonel answered. All learning, all adapting, and more importantly, all helping us learn too. Catherine nodded. The observers, or the exchange students, as they now called themselves, were keeping their end of the deal. For every observer who came to learn about humanity, they shared a piece of their knowledge to help Earth, not their advanced technology. Everyone agreed that would cause more problems than it would solve. Instead, they shared simpler things, better ways to clean water, new ways to grow food, small improvements that looked like normal human progress. Down at Bob's auto shop, Bobby was teaching a new mechanic how to fix a car engine. The young observer had taken human form perfectly, but still struggled with the concept of improvising repairs. Sometimes, Bobby explained, you have to try something just because it feels right. That's how we learn. At the high school, James watched his observer teaching assistant help a struggling student. She wasn't just teaching math. She was learning how humans connect with each other, how they grow through encouragement and understanding. Daniel's construction crew now included 2 observers who were amazed at how humans could build things with such simple tools. They were learning that sometimes the best solutions aren't the most advanced ones. And at Parker's Grocery, Bill had 3 observer helpers who were discovering that running a store wasn't just about selling things, it was about building a community. Mike Thompson walked into the sheriff's office, carrying a folder. How's the integration going? Catherine asked. Better than we expected, Mike said. They're naturals at learning. And the more they learn about being human, the more their own society is changing. They're starting to understand emotions, creativity, even humor. Colonel Bennett smiled. The Pentagon's having a fit trying to figure out why Cedar Grove's quality of life keeps improving without any obvious reason. Let them wonder, Catherine said. Some things are better left unexplained. Later that night, the 5 men met at Morgan's Point, just like they had 6 months ago. But this time, they weren't alone. Their observer friends joined them, taking their true forms under the starlight. Your world is so beautiful, one observer said, its form shimmering with joy. So full of chaos and possibility. We never understood that before. And your world's teaching us too, Bill replied. We're learning that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our knowledge. It's our ability to change, to adapt, to grow. They stood together, humans and observers, watching the stars. Above them, 3 lights formed a familiar triangle in the sky. But now it wasn't a mystery or a threat. It was a reminder that sometimes the best way to learn is to teach, and the best way to grow is to help others grow too. In Cedar Grove, life went on. People worked, played, loved, and lived. And if sometimes they noticed strange, beautiful things out of the corner of their eyes, well, that was just part of what made their town special. After all, as Mike always told his basketball team, the best plays are the ones where everyone works together, even if some of the players happen to be from another world.